STAAR. We even had STAAR when it was the early testing.
The tests were done, when I say earlier in the school year.
Yeah.
And I think even English tests were begun in like April. I mean,
In
March.
some
March.
states, even today, those tests happen in like January and February.
Okay. Well, if you're doing in January, February, you could say almost that would be what is the problem created would not be a problem that I'm going to ask you about. But what happened is we had them in April, the very first week of May, and in April. And there would be a 3-week time period that you could go through almost any building in the state of Texas that was called a school and see nothing of value going on. It was total wasted time. Don't anyone just doubt me. I saw this over and over again. Unless, of course, you had an outstanding teacher who figured out some way to keep the kids occupied with academics. That was very rare. And you can see why. The teacher...
Was it, just for clarity, are you talking about during the testing window everything was shut down, or that once testing happened, it was like after that no instruction happened?
After testing was over, there was no instruction.
Yeah, the disco ball comes down.
The teachers, and I'm not criticizing them because they are tired.
Yeah.
And the kids looked at this as the end of the school year.
It's one of the reasons why we think it's important to put it as close to the end of the school year as possible.
Well, the reason it's there is because I bellyached for a long time, and I got it done. But the thing about it is, even like in 8th grade U.S. history, they ask questions on the tests about the Civil War, and they haven't even covered the Civil War yet. And so there's all kinds of problems like that. But honestly, unless there's something structured that you will have planned for the last 3 weeks of school, there will be nothing. And to me, it's just a waste of taxpayer dollars. Lots of schools, when we finally got this where the tests were moved back, actually worked their school all the way through till the last 2 or 3 days, and they did a field day, and then they did a graduation day. You know, they had 2 or 3 days of not doing actual learning. But they got a lot more teaching and education in, and I just think it's a waste of the tax dollars to allow that to not be utilized that time. Yeah. And it will not be utilized just because we want it to be.
So just as an observation, we generally in education don't want this to be true, but it is true that testing is a significant motivator. And so after testing, there is I think a normal phenomenon in those grades and subjects to let your foot off the gas. And so that does still occur. I don't think it is as bad as it may have been 20 years ago. We have, and one of the reasons why I say that is because I continue to do school visits post-testing from time to time, and school visits after testing from time to time, and still see instruction happening. Now that's just one person, and there's 9,000 campuses. Yeah, that's exactly right. So, but we've also seen very significant investments in summer learning programs in school districts. The legislature, of course, has funded. I think we may be the only state in the country that this is true, that there is a foundation school program entitlement for school districts to extend the school year, and so. There's been a lot of thought, I think, from administrators over the years as to how to maximize learning time for kids, recognizing that this year's STAAR might be over, but got to keep teaching for next year. And so the phenomena that you describe is likely unavoidable, but the question is, can we make it better and ensure that student learning continues to happen regardless of what an assessment calendar may be?
Well, one of the things that I was told at the time, they said, well, we need to get this test graded and get it back to so we know whether or not the children need to go to summer school.
So that's no longer, like, the school districts don't do any of the grading.
Well, I know, but,
yeah.
But even for that was the
why it needed to be so early.
Yeah. And that to me tells me we're working for the lowest common denominator.
That's right. When this is the reason why we have methodically moved the testing windows back and back and back, and then I have later in the year, later in the year, and I have methodically pushed my staff to make grading happen faster and faster and faster.
Obviously it can now with, the other thing is with the grading, are we using any kind of special AI or anything like that for the written portion?
Every assessment question is graded by a human. We have, I think, been reviewing the accuracy of some sort of automated scoring. There's a lot of automated scoring in some tests, the SAT, the TSIA, and so there's some reason to believe that automated scoring can be reliable, but we have human back scores pretty much across the board. That may not continue. We may be setting up sort of like an auditing framework just for cost management long term.
Okay, and would you report back to us to see how that is going, because I'm getting a lot of questions about
Yeah, we look at inter-rater reliability issues regardless of how it's graded. We look at that constantly to make sure that we continue to have a valid and reliable assessment.
When you do inter-rater reliability, do you do 3 people, or do you have a certain?
There's a tiebreaker, so you have two. Like if you're thinking about an open-ended response, you think of 2 different graders and then a tiebreaker.
Okay, that's the way we've done it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
It's 1:59.